Hi everyone, Dave here with Submyt.com, and we're going to go through how to complete a CG1 form in 2025. But first, the CG1 form is relatively simple. The difficulty lies in the calculations. You've got things like foreign exchange rates from your buys and sells, the first in first out rule, and wash selling, just to name a few. So we're going to spend just 30-40 seconds to go through how Submyt can help you with those calculations. Now what we can see here is our capital gains tab in the logged in experience, and this shows all of our sales that we made for 2024 in this example. It goes through our annual allowance, carryover losses of 950 there that we would have filed previously, our taxable total, our period summaries, which we'll get into later on, can be a tricky point for people. Of course, then an annual roll up into our 2024 CGT summary, which shows the total amount owed. Now, of course, you can download and generate a tax summary, or if you're a care customer, you can submit for filing. We make it really easy. So if you need some help with the calculations, come on over to submyt.com, where we make things simple, affordable, and try to save you a good bit of time when doing these kinds of calculations. So with that, let's get into the CG1 form, and feel free to pause at any moment you need. So, page 1 of 4. Now at the top of every page you will be putting in your PPS number, but I would suggest you pause here to have a quick look at what information you need to enter, but fundamentally it's just your contact information for the filing. So, page 2. First number we're going to put in is the aggregate consideration, and this is the total amount of money that you had sold in 2024. See the example up on the screen here? You would put that €4,500 here. Section 1 to 6 generally relates to property retirement reliefs, not really relevant for most folks, so if it's not relevant to you, you just go ahead and skip that. Section 7 looks at chargeable gains. That's the total gain you made before any losses are factored into. So we basically take, if you have that 4,500 example, but it cost 1,500 to acquire that, then you enter 3,000 into that box. Section 8, look at the losses that you realise. So imagine we had a third stock where we made a €500 loss from 123 Inc. We would enter that €500 loss into that particular box. And then in most cases, the next number we would put in would be the net chargeable gains, which is simply the sum of those two. So in our example that we're going to continue throughout this, we take our 3,000 minus the 500 loss in 2024 equals €2,500. Okay, so page 3. So we're going to get into a bit more detail here around the numbers. So if you previously reported unused losses to revenue, you would add them here. So for example, if we had a loss of €250 that we filed for in 2023, this is the box we would enter it into. Now remember, you must have filed it though. So if you haven't filed the loss, you can't use it. So we also have an exemption of 1,270 maximum. So our net gain is 2,250 when we factor in that previous loss. So we would enter the full amount there. You only enter the amount of exemption that you need. So if our total gain was €550, we would enter 550 in that box, never exceeding 1,270. And your net chargeable gain is calculated as follows, using our worked example. Our gain minus our previous year's losses of 2023, minus our current year losses, bearing in mind we're reporting on 2024, minus our 1,200 exemption, gives us a net chargeable gain of €980. Now let's think about losses if we're reporting a loss in general. Your current year losses, 500 in our case, will go in here, and our previously reported losses, 2023, 250, would go in there. And we just sum the two together. In our case, would total €750 for us to carry forward into a future filing that we can offset against our gains. But remember, you must file them to use them, and you must also file even if you made a net loss. Now remember earlier on I mentioned about period allocation. So where we're going to flash up on the screen next will show where you put the taxable gains from each period into the relevant boxes. But the important thing to realize here is if you've used your allowance for period 1, you can't use it again for period 2, and this is why people get tripped up here. So you need to be very careful about the numbers that you enter within that, and again we show you how on our system. Now onto our final page. So the next section is the expression of doubt section for 2024's filing. And this is your opportunity to tell revenue if you have any doubts whatsoever about the numbers that you have entered into it. The next piece is the self-assessment section. We're just highlighting that it says you don't need to complete it if you do it before August 31st, but we recommend you do. Chargeable gains for this period, the last one we did, so if you remember, it's minus everything, is €980 for us to enter here. So that's your reliefs, your losses, everything. The next number would be the amount of tax chargeable, which is just simply 33% of that 980 figure. But remember, we must use whole numbers and roll up. So in this case, we'd enter 324. The next section accounts for release, which most people can't claim. So in our case, in our example, we would just add 324 into this section as well. Now the next section is a late filing surcharge. So if you miss October 31st, 2025 deadline, you would enter in here. And the next section is a record of what you paid already. Remember, these monies should have been paid at the latest by January 31st. And this is the difference of what's due based on your calculations versus what you've paid. So you may be owed a refund, you may have paid it perfectly, it's up to you. And then finally you just sign with your signature under self with the date, and congratulations, you're done. But remember, if the calculations are proven to be a little bit challenging for you, for as little as €60 you can get this logged in experience that we have on the screen here, which does everything for you as you add your cells. And we are really trying to make it as simple as possible for people to fulfill their CGT needs. So come over to Submyt.com if you need a hand with those calculations, and of course we'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. We are planning on publishing a lot more content on YouTube and on various platforms over the coming months, so any and all support that we can get at this stage is really appreciated. Have a great day guys, thanks for listening, hope you learned something, see you soon.